between these three guys, if they don't know the answer, it can't be done at a race. So, Ted, thanks a lot for coming down. He was on his way from New York to Chicago to Richmond to Savannah and decided to stop in. So we appreciate it.
How's everyone doing?
Great.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Metellus. I am a course operations guy for Competitor Group, the producers of the Rock and Roll Marathon series. As I've mentioned to Bob in passing, my technical name is Cone Slinger and Goo Packet Picker-Upper. So I'm quite proficient in both those things. I want to be sensitive to time, so I want it to be less about me and the things that I've done, but I've been in the industry for 19 years, done a lot of things, a lot of places with a lot of people. I was talking to a gentleman a little earlier and from Oklahoma, and he said something that pretty much ices what we do. I'm not doing this for money, I do it for the love. And I'm like, amen to that. I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. So same boat. I'm not going to be a millionaire doing this, but I'm definitely going to have a million amazing friends. So today we're going to touch on the vast, magical world of course operations. I try to break it down into a couple of key places and key things, problems that we have in course design and planning, the solutions that are out there, and the experience overall. So to answer Pat's question of how many times is Ted going to ask the group a question, it's going to be one. How many of you all here are either race producers, race directors, operations people, course people, the folks that actually make the magic happen? Show of hands. Excellent. So again, just to kind of get a gauge on who I'm talking to here, it's nitty-gritty stuff. So let's just dive right into this really quick. So I'm often asked the million-dollar question, what is it that you do? What's your goal? What's your mission when I go into a new city or a new market? And then I have this long explanation, you know, design and execute a logistically and operationally sound route while showcasing the highlights of the market and venue with minimal community impact and cost, AKA bullshit. So I don't know how, I just try to make it happen. That's it. I make the magic happen one way or another. That photo is here in Philly. I ran the Philly half a couple years ago, and that was an epic shot that pretty much sums up the experience that you want to have for your participants. But yes, the goal is to design an amazing route, execute it well, don't mess anything up, don't piss anybody off, and don't spend $1 million doing it. That's the object of the game. The problems. What are some of the challenges in course concept design? So this photo says it all best because the world doesn't move to the beat of just one drum. What might be right for you may not be right for some. That's Arnold. I'm very happy there's a lot of y'all that are not millennials and know who this person is. So there are different strokes for different folks, and there are lots of problems that come up. So just really quickly, rapid fire, some of the challenges that we encounter with trying to design a 5K, 10K, half marathon, ultra, 50-mile or 1-mile race. Let's throw them out there, and if I had candy, I'd throw it to you, but I don't. So yeah, just shoot it out. Some of the challenges. Church traffic. Church traffic. Give me, parking. Permits. Police. What was the other one? Potties, yes. So that's some of the many, and the list can go on and on and on as far as impact to the community, the design of the route, traffic control, construction that happens in the city. So we're going to touch on a couple of the problems that we encounter with some solutions. So there's always going to be a way to figure it out. Some might be incredible and spectacular and make you happy as the producer. Some might be incredible and spectacular to make the city happy or the municipality happy. And the happy medium is to try to find a route that works for all parties while still presenting and executing an incredible route for your participants. So we're going to touch on some of the solutions here. I don't have all the answers, but I've been around enough times, and Lord knows I've messed up a couple of times, a lot of times, many times, all the time. And I figured out a way to not mess up again. We'll touch on the route. So what route do we use? Where to go? How do we get there? That's always the $1 million question. So it's the start. Like, what are we going to design? What's the course that we're going to do? How is this going to look like? Kind of broke it down to some couple of things here that will hopefully kind of resonate with some of you all that have done this. Research, research, research. Definitely do your homework, do your planning, and figure out what it is that you're doing and where you're going to do it. What are the other events in the area doing? The chances of you producing an event in a market that doesn't have other events is slim to none. I went to a conference once, and they talked about producing an event someplace that there's never been an event produced before. And they talked about Alaska, been there, done that. They talked about South America, been there, done that. So they decided to produce an event on the moon. There's now been a race on the moon, so we designed a race on the moon and the concept of it and the design of it and the experience of it and so on and so forth. So my point is, you're not going to produce a race someplace that hasn't had a race happen there already. So do your research there. Design routes on the many apps that are out there and programs that are out there in the designing world. So, I mean, I asked a question online to some colleagues of ours in the industry, and there was a slew of different types of apps and programs and websites and mapping programs that are there. Take the time out, find one that you're proficient in and comfortable in, and go crazy in your designs. Go big, go nuts, be creative. Kind of, it's your blank slate or your whiteboard, and just draw to it and kind of scale back, but save all the designs that you have. That's one thing that a lot of folks don't do. They'll design something, oh, it doesn't work, delete it, and never have something as a reference point, and then they'll either redesign the same thing again and say, oh, wow, that looks really familiar. I was like, yeah, dude, that was what you did 2 days ago. So like artists or musicians will write a song or get a tune together and say, oh, that doesn't work, chuck it, and then end up doing the same thing again. Don't be that person. Save the stuff that you've done because you can always use it as a reference point later on. Don't be a desk jockey. So again, with the new age of just the volume of technology that is available, what I am saying, yes, design the route and maps that you have online. Go out there and see the route. You know, touch it, run it, ride it, experience it, get your gauge on what the course looks like, because what may be online and on computer or on your desktop may not necessarily be there in the real world on the ground. So get out there and check that out. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. You know, be creative with some of the routes that you are designing, because you may be put in a box where you can be put in a box, I should say, where you can't go on certain roadways or routes or streets because of impact concerns. Well, but you are kind of pushed towards a particular route or course. Look at that differently, mix it up, see what you can do to make that experience great for your participants. Last but not least, which is a critical piece, which is the support and engagement from police, EMS, fire, city management, community groups. Get those folks involved and engaged. Again, regardless if the event is small or big, you want to get those guys tied into what it is that you're doing. Communicate with them. Community impact. Churches, hospitals, businesses, I know some of those things that were brought up there, major roadways, construction plans, capital improvement. That is a huge issue, especially in, well, I shouldn't even say especially in. There are new markets that are always developing and changing and getting new roadways and new traffic plans and so on and so forth. And then there are older markets that need the work. So Atlanta, I remember producing events there 10 plus years ago where they went from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road to a highway because the city was just growing so quickly. So staying on top of what these plans are going to be are critical. So we'll run through some of the solutions to the problems here. Again, can't emphasize enough engagement and connection with PD, city management, traffic, Department of Transportation, parks people if you're doing races in parks and things like that. And again, the community groups. Don't lose sight of the community groups. Somebody said permits. Submit your permit ASAP. That's in many municipalities and cities, getting that permit in the system is critical because then it pings as that date is locked in for this individual. And depending on the sophistication of that city and their programming system, that then goes from the city manager's office, special events office, to Department of Transportation, the streets department, so on and so forth. So that way they're not going to dig a hole on your course the weekend of your event. It's already been up there in their system. So definitely jump on getting the permit done. Create and distribute notification information. The notification piece I know is a ton of work. That's a lot, especially if you're dealing with a half marathon or marathon distance. That's a lot of homes. That's a lot of businesses. A lot of folks that are impacted by your event. Think about the volume of work that you're going to have to do to fix the problem versus addressing it from jump. Yes, it's a lot of work out there, but putting the notification information out there and the creative ways of doing that, whether it is through public access, getting on some local television station in town and letting them know what's going on, sending out email blasts. A lot of cities have information on buildings and properties and schools and things of that nature, and letting them know what's going on. You know, putting posters and information up inside of supermarkets and your local coffee shops and things of that nature. Whatever can get the word out, you want that there so people know what's going on, when it's happening, and how it's affecting them. The creation of traffic plans. Now that's a little bit more sophisticated depending on the market and city that you're in. But again, a lot of markets will say, listen, we'd love for you to use Main Street, but the problem is that's the major access point coming off of this highway, that road, so on and so forth. You're either SOL and can't execute the course because say it's a critical piece that joins your marathon and half marathon or something like that, or you look at ways to try to say, okay, can we create an access lane for runners to go through as well as vehicles? Can we put the equipment out there to ensure that? Because what you end up getting back will maybe an incredible route, an incredible experience, but also mitigating any of the issues that you may have with your city agencies, police, and so on and so forth. So look at traffic plans. There are traffic control companies out there that are specialized in creating MOT plans, mode of transportation plans, because that's what they do on a day-to-day when there's major construction going on a roadway and being able to get people through. Then tying into the community outreach piece, getting the maps out there, the schedules out there so people know what's going on, both from a community awareness piece, but also from a participant piece and also from a city piece. They want to know what's going on and what's happening there. Lastly, recapping and staying engaged with your marketing in your city. Touching base with folks. I always say anywhere between 35 days to 40 days post the event, have a recap meeting with those guys. Connect with them, talk to them, talk about what worked, what didn't work, what needs to be improved. And then stay in touch with those folks every 3 to 6 months. Just always, hey, how's it going? How are things going? Are there any plans going in? Are there any construction concerns I need to be aware of? So on and so forth. How to execute the route. So that's always the next piece too. So after you've done your pre-pro, all your planning, so what are we going to do race weekend? I know that Ryan and the team are going to touch on a lot of the nitty-gritty on the execution operational end, but definitely trying to figure out what your route execution will look like. Goes into, again, all the stuff that we've talked about before. So really quickly on the solutions end, resources. While the first part was doing your research, now it's all about making sure that you have the resources in hand to execute your race well. And again, I know Ryan and the team are going to talk a little bit more about that. Approvals, certifications, staffing, equipment, insurance. Again, the meat of what makes your race work or what makes your event work. The people, the stuff. Make sure you have those checked in. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. That's critical, especially as a race lead and operations lead. Definitely go out there and see things. For many of the timers that are in the room that are involved in race production and race operations, I tell you the same thing. A lot of the really solid timers will email race directors and say, hey, can I get your certification map? Can I get a layout of what the course is going to look like? Can you tell me whether or not there's going to be any access lanes anywhere near the 5K split or the 10K split, because I'm laying mats out, okay? Don't be afraid to get out there and see those things. They may not have the ability to go out there and tell you what the measurement or the width of the road is. Get that wheel out there and measure that width. Get that information on the pre-end, so, prior to the event, so that way, come race day, your job and experience is a lot easier. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Know your route, mark your route, get out there and see that, because you don't want to be that event that somebody gets lost at. Be transparent with your information. This is a big battle nowadays, especially with old school producers versus new school producers, where somebody will walk in with binders worth of information and be like, here's the information for everybody, and somebody comes in with a piece of paper in their pocket and go, all right, I'm going to run through the race plan. You're not being very transparent. God forbid you get hit by a bus. You had some bad oysters the night before and you can't be on site. Who knows what you know? So be transparent. I can't stress that enough. What you know, everybody else in the room should know. So if we were all producing an event, you guys would all know what I know. So that my job is a hell of a lot easier and you have all the answers to the questions. A mantra I live by, a safe event is a well-produced event, and a well-produced event is a safe event. That ties straight with police, EMS, fire. In the world that we live today, the better prepared you are going into race weekend, the easier the job's going to be on the part of PD and all the other agencies, and the quicker you'll get a ass back to the market, ass back to the city. So definitely want to execute and prepare a really safe and solid event. I went through this quickly, but are there any questions? Right now.
Are you finding in cities that they're giving you designated routes? You know, like Chicago Grant Park area, for example. You know, most races go there. They go up Columbus. are other cities doing that as well, that saying that these are the specific roads you can use, it's up to you to make your event unique on those roads?
Yes, that's the short answer. Yes, that's happening more and more. And that now, again, is that is the nature of our industry, solely based on volume. Look around you. Look how many people are in this room. How many people are producing events in this room. How many people are producing events in this room in the same cities that you live in. That's one of the reasons why the cities are getting inundated and overwhelmed, and they have to control it. So in lieu of saying, no new events, you can't have anything here, they'll sooner say, this is a designated location, you guys can execute your race. And it goes back to my earlier point of be creative and different and make your race yours. Yes? What website or app do you like to use for mapping your course? It's a good question. I actually use a European website. It's like Go Run something or other. I'll have some follow-up information for you. I'll apologize for not having it in my deck because I was crunching on time. Map My Run's a great app. I know a lot of people use that. Google is a great map app program now that's actually gotten a lot more sophisticated to the point that you can design a map on Google and put elements within it and share that, and it gives you a GPS element piece to it. So you can see yourself on the course with the blue dot, and you can ride your route that way too. So I use a different app that I end up digging up and finding when there was that weird thing going on with Map My Run a couple of years ago. If you guys may or may not remember, where it wasn't letting you go in and edit and couldn't change anything. So I got panicky and I went to this UK website, and it works fantastic. No worries. I'll get that answer for you, though. It's on my desktop. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. On to the next.
All right, I'm Ryan Griesmeyer with Race Day Events out of Madison, Wisconsin. Kind of picking up where Ted left off. Nowhere near as good as Ted, but picking up where he left off on equipment logistics and management. Just a quick little bit about Race Day. We started in 2006. 2011, we actually took it to more of a full-time business rather than a hobby. 2013 was when we first kind of dabbled in the national scene. We were asked from a Chicago company to take 11 events across the nation, from Portland, Maine to California, Texas, and several of those other states. So we got a little bit of test there, as well as we tried our own national level series producing our own events in 6 different states. And did not do as well producing our own events, but we found that getting equipment and stuff across the country was definitely an achievable goal. 2014, we got a lot more efficient and competitive just by getting to more states. And then 2017, we are now, we should be in 15 states by the end of the year. And if all goes well, we'll be at about 350 different events. We found that the full service package is what the easiest way to get further distances if you're doing timing, equipment, and supply and labor. You can kind of give up some of the price on the timing. You're getting the money back on the equipment. So we find that if it's full package, it's easier to get everything across. If you're doing just one or the other, it's a little bit tougher to travel the distances. One of the things I found for own versus rent on your own equipment, I was kind of a stickler of paying back in 1 year or less. So a lot of stuff we bought quickly was cones, fence, and then the truss pieces. 1 year return was kind of the rule of thumb, and so far it's worked pretty well. It was a scalable deal, so we bought a couple hundred pieces of fence right off the bat, a couple hundred cones. When we needed more, we kept growing a little bit more and more. As you can probably guess, certain items require some special vehicles or equipment. Fence is always a tough one. When you're doing the barricades or the fence, it requires a large trailer. And when you get a large trailer, it requires a much larger truck. So, and then you get a second trailer, and then also you need 3 orders of fence going out. You need 3 trailers. And it grows pretty quickly from there.
Have you been able to finance all that stuff off of cash flow, or do banks loan money to timers?
A little of each. Mostly just cash flow, just the way I preferred to do it. Yeah. We have found that, especially with vehicles and trailers, the banks will help out a little bit. Some of the difficulty that we've run into, we are now in our 5th office in 5 years, I think. Every time you buy a new piece of equipment, you need to put it someplace. Started out in a condo garage to a 40 by 80 storage building to another office. We had 2 offices at one point, and now we have a rather large warehouse with nice parking in the back for all vehicles and trailers, plus equipment inside and outside storage. Repairs and maintenance is another item you find in a hurry. Thousands of feet of fence that is bright white when you get it. Doesn't stay bright white very long when it's metal out in the elements, rust starts to turn orange pretty quickly. Vehicles and vehicle maintenance, as I said, buying trailers, you need something to pull it. You need more vehicles, more trucks, and more of our recent findings is DOT regulations. Anytime you cross state lines, anytime you haul something heavy, all kinds of new regulations, and you just kind of find them as you go. A lot of studying, trying to figure that stuff out. Some of the tips we've learned, always have a backup plan. You never know when a vehicle is going to go down. You never know when somebody like myself will book too many feet of fence in a given weekend. Hopefully you have somebody you can work with closely and find additional fence. And always make sure you have staff that are experienced and you can trust getting the stuff out there. Allocating resources. Training and experience seems to be probably the most important, as you need to get people across state lines. You're sending somebody on the road 14 hours driving. You want to make sure you trust them, that they're going to actually get to the place. You want to walk kind of a fine line on the times. You don't want to send somebody 4 days early just to put them in a hotel for a long time. You want to make sure you get them there, but give them enough time for anything that could happen. And we find that if you get repeat customers and repeat staff, send the same staff to the same customers, seems to really keep the efficiency going. And then if you can use partners to make travel and equipment hauling more efficient, really if you can partner up, there's a lot of people in here, obviously your competitors. We found that building a business of finding partners, finding our competitors that do the exact same thing. If somebody has fence halfway to a job that we're going to be at, we can stop by, pick up their fence. You save that much miles without hauling fence. You might get staffed that same way. Timing companies, I know we work with a lot of timing companies doing the same thing. Rather than fly somebody to one of these other states to time something, a lot of times we'll hire a local company. Even though it's our full service contract, it's cheaper to do it that way. A couple of takeaways. Definitely looks simpler than it is. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about today, we learned by doing the wrong way. From flat tires on trailers, overloading trailers, not strapping things the right way, pieces of equipment falling off on the highway, people backing into things, trucks getting wrecked, transmissions going. It's a little of everything. We've learned the wrong way. Importance of DOT and insurance. Insurance is obviously you have to have insurance no matter what. And then DOT is another one. We're still kind of finding our way through that, but it's a process, and it's depending on what you're hauling, how much you're hauling, the weight you're hauling, crossing state lines, it triggers a whole bunch of different things. And then again, knowing how to partner with people in the industry, both for what not to do. Again, I can tell you guys all kinds of stuff what not to do because I've done it wrong. Learning from people that know how to do things right. It's the way that our business was built, is the right people told us how to do things. And then obviously helping with the staffing and backfilling. Questions?
One of the big things on my mind is managing the equipment, managing your inventory where it is and transferring it properly, keeping good logs of who has what. And mostly we do that in the spreadsheet that 90% of the time isn't really up to date with who has what decoders or PA systems, routers, modems, computers, all that stuff. And I've seen a few Kickstarter campaigns where actually put a little RFID chip on each piece of equipment, and I don't know. I'm just wondering what your system is for managing inventory and its location and doing equipment transfers.
Spreadsheets and really good staff, because I do not do a good job of managing the equipment. Our timing department is probably one of the most organized people you've ever met. If you haven't met Autumn yet, she's right back there. If you want some organizational skills, talk with her. I am probably a large nightmare in Autumn's life because I am not good at managing how much equipment we have, and I will very often oversell it, and that's why you see I'm much better at partnering with all of you guys out there saying, help, 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 I overbooked. We need to do a little bit better. So right now Excel is the best we found. I have been doing a lot of research on rental, any sort of rental software and that, and have not been able to find anything that really works well for us yet. So Excel is what we use.
Ryan, do you see any industry trends?
As far as just on the equipment side, or lots of races, obviously. I think it is starting to fade down a little bit. We are seeing people cutting back and kind of pinching on the equipment just to meet budgets a little bit tighter. But we obviously flourish off of as many races as possible, needing as much equipment as possible. And it seems we're holding steady right now, but I think the number of races is going down a little bit.
What size races are you willing to travel for? Like, how do you do your formula of how far you will travel for what event?
More or less for me, it's just a quick cost analysis spreadsheet of if it's a 200-person race and this is what they're willing to pay, we'll go do it as long as it's going to make us money. You know, we just another quick Excel spreadsheet that runs the cost versus how much is coming in. We'll go anywhere if it's going to make us money.
Yeah, Ryan, and maybe for Ted, we have a race that has a massive PD bill, close to 100,000. Can you talk about police? Can you talk about working with police and substituting equipment for man, and how that negotiation, working with DOT, police, what you two have found in course setup that can reach, you know, an economically, you know, feasible middle ground between police and equipment?
It's actually a really good question. It's something we're working on right now with an event in Milwaukee. They have a large police bill plus a large traffic bill, and you're trying to manage that one way or the other, whether you can, you know, cut down on some of the traffic, the barricades you're putting out, the cones you're putting out, or if they need to staff that with a police officer. It comes down to whatever venue, whatever your city you're at, but also managing exactly, you know, trying to persuade them what the safest way is, what you feel the safest way is. You make sure you have a volunteer there. You might need less traffic stuff or cones or even less police officers, but I can probably speak to that a little better.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things I look at. One is timing, because most markets will charge you a minimum maximum based on the number of hours that you're working or that the race is happening. So there's some places that have a 4-hour minimum, 5-hour minimum, so that depends. So I look at how long the race is, where you can implement some course cutoffs to help kind of save some coin, especially for your slower participants on the back end. If they're going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases in some markets, where do we trim the fat there? The other thing too is I would look in the market that you're in at substitution options, whether it's traffic safety folks, military personnel that you can make a donation to. To Ryan's point, whether or not your barricade vendor, so I can contact Ryan's shop or LAS or anybody like that and say, hey, do you guys have traffic control equipment? Great, it's gonna be cheaper for me to rent it from you than it would be from a traffic agency, or get it from the city's services and have it out there and use. So a little bit of digging there as far as what you can substitute for bodies is key. But at the end of the day, your local PD is holding the keys. So if they don't feel like it's safe, then the easiest thing that I would do is look at time and see where you can cut, you know, have a course cutoff location if folks need to get to a certain location by a certain time. And if they don't, then they have to pass that location, drop your timing mat, so on and so forth. Obviously, you want to let your participants know where that cutoff point is, but that could save you some money here and there.
We were actually able to reuse some officers in different locations because of those same kind of minimums. So we were able to move someone from the starting area to further down the course, because now we can utilize one officer for two. Now, with that kind of bill, I don't know how much you can bring it down, but every little bit does help.
I'm Chris McDonald. I am the founder and owner of Go Race Productions. We're out of Charleston, South Carolina. We produce, time, own, consult with about 80 events a year. I'm going to be talking about working with races as a third party. We help out mainly with running events, which I would say most of the folks here do. We also are involved with lots of triathlon, and we have actually moved our scope of service to anything, anyone, kind of the same as Ryan. If you're willing to pay me money, I'll come and help you with your event. So we've moved into paddle sports, regattas, adventure, off-road, and now we're actually starting to get into equipment rental as well for weddings of anything else, because Charleston's the #1 wedding destination in the US almost. So how to make it work with these folks. So I know we've already had a show of hands as to who the people making the race happen, making the course happen. For you event owners that are hiring third-party vendors, this might be an insight into how some of your partnerships work on the other end. For those of you that are event production specialists or timers or consultants, you might say, well, that's not how I do it. That's probably true. There's more than likely a million different iterations of how to work with events. This is how we do it. Understanding your strengths, developing a scope of services and costs. The biggest thing of all, that if you take anything home, managing expectations. And I will keep beating that drum until the day I die. Then you actually do have to deliver and then follow up and re-signing the event. Understanding your strengths, it could be understanding your market, but the biggest thing here is how many of you went to college to put on races? So I've met one now. So everybody's entering, almost everyone, 99.99% of us are entering laterally. And because of that, most of us have come in helping with events and taking on more and more responsibility as we get going. One day we wake up and say we can do it on our own. Or we break away, or we partner with the parent company we were with, you name it. And you just continue to grow. You realize that you've run out of space in your condo, so you get a bigger place. You realize you don't have enough time, so you hire another person. And so one thing, and I've talked to many of my friends here this week about it, and that is people don't stop and look back. And they don't say, what is fulfilling about this job? What am I good at? How do I put myself in a position to succeed? And it might sound like some self-help kind of thing, but people can tell if you enjoy what you do. Like 100%. You can put on a face for one event, but the moment you get tired, the moment something goes wrong, it will come out. So taking the time to figure that out will help you build your business so you can succeed. And I kind of joke about taking time when you have spare time. I don't know about you guys, but there is no off season. So, but trying to find a time to sit down and reflect as to what your purpose is. Okay, so this has nothing to do with some fancy little deal. Partnering and finding your strengths, in my opinion, is something super important. That is the lamest video I possibly could have made. However, I didn't make it because I have no idea how to make it. So the point in that is that I found this website. I know Brian Jenkins has pushed this thing on 20 other people. I think I found it by myself, but I'll give him credit for it anyway. But Fiverr.com. Anybody heard of it? Anybody use it? If you've never heard of it, it's basically what will you do for $5? And not like in a weird way, but it's like, let me help you with your business for $5. So for instance, I taught myself how to use Illustrator. However, I'm at like a freshman in college Illustrator level. Like, there's plenty of people that run circles around me. But I can send something off and pay $5 and have somebody take a PNG file and make it into a vector file. So to some of you, that might not matter. But like, finding those partnerships, finding those strengths that other people have, and for the right price, now you don't have it on your plate. So we've done that in a lot of different situations, which has allowed us to develop a scope of service and cost for ourselves. Now I had a request to like list out how I actually price things out. Nah, I enjoy you guys, but I'm going to keep our actual pricing structure but we do have a boilerplate list associated with cost. And similar to that reflection, we sat down and we basically did a lot of what I'm sure you guys have done and took into account the equipment cost, wear and tear, the staffing cost, consumables, because we're not just like if you're a timer, what do the tags cost? If you're using ChronoTrack, if you're using MyLab, if you're using RaceResult, if you're using Trident, like all these different lists, RFID, like they all have different price points, which means at the end of the day, as a timer, we all might say $2 a person, but we're all not making the same amount of money. So we also have to look at how much time it's going to take. If you call us and say we want you to time a 5K versus, hey, we want you to time our 200-mile relay, the price isn't going to be the same, especially if you want us up for however many hours those take. So sitting down and figuring out what your time is worth is a great starting point. The meet and greet talk. This, in my opinion, is one of the more important things that happens. Number one, I get RFPs, as I'm sure most of you guys do, all the time. And I have never sent a contractor proposal without speaking with someone either on the phone or in person. The reason being is because somebody will say, I want you to time my race. Send me your cost. That's it. That gives you nothing. You know nothing about what their event is. You know nothing about their expectations. So once you can start figuring out what their expectations are, who's going to be responsible for what, then you can start building your contract. In terms of your contract, for those of you that are just getting into the industry, please have a lawyer look over that. It might cost you $500, and you might think that that's a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's not. So in most situations, you have a one-pager or a two-pager, because, I mean, in other situations, I think we have a military contract that's 172 pages long, and I'll be honest, I haven't read it all. There's some really fine print that, anyways. So most of our contracts are just a couple pages. There's no need to confuse what we're trying to get across. So we have a boilerplate header that our legal has given us, and then a variable structure for the body that basically is broken down into my responsibilities, your responsibilities, and then the schedule of compensation. Clearly define all tasks so that there is no confusion. Similar to the 172 pages, I'd be willing to bet my contracting agent at NAF also has not read 172 pages of that. And then finally get a signed contract and a deposit. So managing expectations. Communicate. Communicate, communicate. Managing expectations kind of goes all the way across every piece of everything we ever do. Explaining who's in charge of what. There are so many different facets of what we do that a race will sign you on to time and then assume that fill in the blank. I can't even like begin. Anyone want to yell out things that have been assumed that you're going to do? Certify the course. Provide all the water. Your timing, by the way. You're not coming in for production. I mean, like, just, I'm always surprised. And one of my friends is trying to talk me into, and I probably need help, but write a book of all the silly things that are expected because those expectations weren't clearly defined. So a lot of what we do is also explain what we're not going to do. And I kind of highlighted the to include but not limited to line because it's like, you're the race director, your responsibilities include but are not limited to these 10 items. I put those 10 items in there because they're so critical to the event, such as work with the police, get a permit, get event insurance, name us as an additional insured on that event insurance. Again, it goes on and on. So then we actually review. I'd never just send the contract. I also ask, do you have any questions? Because I don't want someone just to sign a contract. I want everyone to understand and be clear. So then we create event timelines and share with all parties involved once we get to that contracted point. When should these permit applications be submitted? When should we do the RunSignUp side of things with registration opening and closing? One of the biggest things we deal with, we do a lot of shirts for folks. When should artwork be completed? And then we have the very serious conversation of what vector artwork is. And when sponsor logos are due, because it's always great when we're 3 days before the event and they sign that $10,000 sponsor and we need them on the back of the shirt and we've already got the shirts delivered. So, again, managing those expectations is of the utmost importance. So I picked the smallest, simplest event route and two-pager that I give to both my staff and an event. And so what this is it's a mom's run. It was a 5K course, and it's got the entire course map, but there's numbers. Every number, and I know you can't read it, but every number under here is associated with the resources to that spot. So for instance, number 1 is a right turn sign, cones plus 1 directional volunteer. Why do we do this? Because if I don't like oysters, so if I eat the bad shrimp, somebody else can go to this event. Well, I didn't go to this event. So someone else went to this event and did this event, did the event production for this. So anytime it's not a straightaway, we have fairly simple course diagrams with what we want to happen, where the turns are, and where the aid stations go, what the expectation of the aid station is. We have a separate deal for volunteers. We have a separate one for police. And what we do is we make a packet and share those with the event so that we're all on the same page. And I realize it might be a lot of information. We have made master maps before. The problem with the master map is you start getting so much stuff on there that you can forget, because rarely are the police officers also in charge of the aid station. So they don't necessarily need to be on the same map. In terms of our staff, we make very, very simple. We try to keep it simple because the more you try to, like, I mean, we could put fancy logos on this, but like I have a laser printer that I use. I mean, it's black and white. We don't need color on this. This is going to get folded up and put in all of my staff's pocket, all the volunteers' pocket. Everybody gets one. So, and it's with them. I'm sure we could text it to everybody's phone, but somebody's battery would die and that wouldn't know what was supposed to happen. And so by giving the time, the tasks, and then putting every single group onto the same matrix, I tell my staff, I don't care if you finished your task. If you finish your task, you're close to another one, knock it out. Like, we're here as a team. The volunteers are part of our team. We're all here to get it done. ED on that is actually the race director, the race owner. We were the race directors here, so, and volunteers are taking care of some of those tasks. So we give the same thing to the police and to the city so they understand. Again, managing expectations. The moment you walk into those city council meetings or those special event meetings and you start providing them with too much information, they start trusting the fact that you know what the hell you're doing. And so many people fill out their permit, and that's that. They hand in their permit, they fill in the dotted line. I think nearly every single permit we put in, there's like 2 or 3 appendices because there's not enough space for us to explain what they should expect of us on race day. So the more information you can give to everyone, the more transparent you can be, the better off you are. Because at no point are the police wondering what's going on at 8:16. And yeah, we probably didn't have a finish before 16 minutes. They were pushing strollers, but still. So I mean, and it's worked. We've been doing it for 15 years, and I'd be remiss if I did not give credit where credit was due on this idea. It actually started with my time at Setup Events, which was 15, 17 years ago. So we've been using it from everything what I guess now is Ironman North Carolina, when we were, Greg Hawkins in the back and I were part of that team. I think Don was there as well. I mean, so this is not just small 5K. This has been implemented on, you know, your 50-person 5K and your 3,500-person 70.3 and full iron distance races. And then finally, you do have to deliver. So you can do all this pre-planning, but you do have to show up. And so if you're in charge of those permits, if you're in charge of putting in the orders, follow through. That's kind of the obvious there. And then pack a pickup of the race, make the magic happen. You've done the hard work. Now it's just implement. You know, you made all those maps. You've contacted everybody you're supposed to. So do it. At the end, wrap up, debrief, call, and or email. So normally I try to do this in the week following the event. I try to create a list. It's like the sandwich method or the Oreo method, where you sandwich the good stuff and put the bad stuff in the middle. So try to create a list of wins no matter the event, and then action items. And I think I've been a part of one event ever where I quite literally could not think of a single thing that we needed to change. And I actually looked back on that event, and say that I probably wasn't as good of a race director there because of it. There's always something to improve. It doesn't mean you failed. It just means something can be improved. The final invoice, I've gotten invoices from people on like Excel spreadsheets. I've gotten them on pieces of paper. If you want the race again, like at least do a QuickBooks kind of thing. Like make it look semi-professional. And then begin talks for next year and at minimum pencil in to the calendar so that you can limit we have the same problem about overbooking sometimes, but so you can limit the overbooking and begin planning out your staffing and needs and equipment. And the other side of it is, and we have this phrase on the back side of every single table cover, facing backwards, not forwards, because that's for my staff. Be awesome and have fun doing it. Because in case you guys haven't noticed, this field is pretty cool. Like, most people are like, you get to do that for a living? And then they come in staff force and they're like, okay, you can have it. But peripherally, actually, I mean, I love it. I would never change my decision to come into the industry. But like, if you're not having fun, what are you doing? Like, seriously, why are you in the industry if you're not having a good time with it? So, any questions? Yeah.
You were talking earlier about contracts and clearly delineating who does what. Mm-hmm. And so we've been doing that for a while, but even in spite of having a written contract and proposal, both going to a client with everything written out, I still all the time have people expecting us, we're a timing company, expecting us to do things that we don't, and even though twice they have something in writing showing that we don't do it. Do you have any tips for how you get your customers to read?
Yeah, so we've had a similar circumstance, and what I normally do is when they request that, usually it's via email or text, I call them, number one. I know people here, Megan's one of them, she's like, every time we're on the phone we talk so much. It's because I over-communicate, and I know that. And so part of that is because when I call, I want to make sure I'm clear. If you want this extra thing, there's going to be a charge. So I don't mind doing that extra thing, well, to a degree. But yeah, so then I put it in writing because we also have a clause in our contract that is, you know, any changes must be in writing and signed by both parties so that we can't just amend to our discretion. And we bill them for it. So if you want more inflatables, if you want more PA systems, if you want cups, if you want consumables, we're going to bill you for it. And so what I've actually started doing is, do you have an example of like what they're asking for?
Yeah, what'll happen is, you know, like I had a race, she was upset about just about everything, but specifically she said, you know, well, your staff was great, but they just showed up and timed the race. I'm like, well, that's what you hired us to do. What else were you expecting? So
we actually put it into our contract that we're going to time the race, we're going to bring these systems, we're going to put them at these points. Our expectations of you are, you're going to be the race director. You're in charge of packet pickup if that's one of their duties. You're in charge of course management. You're in charge of permits. You're in charge of all these things, and that's where that, but not limited to, and we try to spell out every single thing that, and if I got the, you didn't provide cups, next contract I'd send to them, and you are responsible for providing cups. So, and then at the bottom, I will have like an appendix that says, if you want us to provide these, it will be at a cost of $10 per 100 cups or 1,000 cups or whatever. And it's basically my fuel to get to Costco, the cost of the cups, and a 20% or a 20% surcharge for my inconvenience, if you want me to do that thing. And I'm not saying that's exactly what happens every single time, but if you're calling me at the last second and I need to go start running around and I haven't planned that out, then, I mean, if you're working, you should get paid for it, in my opinion, right? So, but making people read, we can't force the people to read, but we can try to clarify that they're going to be billed if we need to do those things.
I want to know for extended contracts, for like if you're signing on to do a whole lot of things like be the race director and do the permits and all that, how do you structure your payment milestones, and how much have you usually extracted upfront by race day? And what do you expect after race day?
Right. So on most of ours, especially with smaller events, we end up having a base fee and then a per person fee. And that base fee is especially for first year or smaller events, because we have no idea, you know, if 20 people show up, we still have to cover our costs. Like I'm a for-profit company. We do most of our work with nonprofits. And we try to help them with the tools to succeed, but some people just think that putting a website up, you know, is going to be 1,000 people and they're going to make $1 million. So normally we set it up so that it's about 50 to 75% of our base fee. That is a deposit, non-refundable. If there is an act of God of sorts and the race is canceled, we discuss that with the event on a one-to-one basis. We've only had it happen a handful of times, and I basically tell them, if you're going to refund all the participants' money, then I'll refund your deposit. But if you're going to keep the participants' money, then I'm going to keep your deposit, because it's only fair. Like we both have to work the same way, and I'm sure some people disagree with that, but that's how we've worked it. And in terms of other milestones, if there are major buys in the middle, then we might invoice them for, say, shirts in advance. If we're buying, 10,000 shirts, I'm sorry, I can't float that on my credit, or I choose not to float that on my credit card until their final invoice is due. And also making sure on your contract that you have a net payment. And at one point we were net 30, and then we moved to net 15, and now we're net 10. And our military contract, our NAF agent said, oh no, we only do net 90. And I was like, well, unfortunately for you, this 5-year contract, somebody signed a net 10. And so we are currently one of the only contracts in the United States that gets paid net 10 because of that. So I mean, we're smaller. We're not the size of competitor group, and we don't have 350 races. So I mean, my company cannot absorb that cost over 3 months.
Do you educate your clients?
Yes, I spend a lot of time on RunSignUp, actually. There's different sides of the education of the client. I spend a lot of time empowering them to use the tools that we have. And I think RunSignUp's a great tool. I push them to learn how to use the apps. I push them to use the coupon codes, and I'm still there as a resource. I think most of my events call me about RunSignUp questions before they ever call. Actually, they don't call Brian or Matt. They call me, and I conference RunSignUp in, so we're all part of the discussion at the same time. On one exception, and that's fundraising, because I don't have the bandwidth to personally right now. I don't have the bandwidth to do fundraising talks too. So we go through a lot of that, and then we also give some expectation cards on what volunteer duties are, so that we don't get a 10-year-old Boy Scout on like Main Street with a flag. And we try to set up age limits on, or chaperone numbers like at different places, so that, again, we've had some situations where a Boy Scout troop or Girl Scout troop shows up as the primary volunteer group, and parents weren't happy when we were, at one point we were attempting to put them out there because we had no other option. Luckily we had a late in the game volunteer group come in and chaperone them. So, I mean, in terms of you guys educating your clients, you guys have a special process?
We're a different monster because we own and produce our own events, but the education piece is far-reaching because I think we all have our clients, which are our participants, and like the next evolution of what we all do is the education piece, because the old line from the furniture company, an educated consumer is our best customer. So if they know what time the race starts, where the aid stations are, those types of things, it only makes the experience that much easier and better, and it also saves you a ton of money. You're not wasting resources and time and whatnot, waiting for folks to catch up. To your point about the client piece, because in the past life I've done that, managing their expectation tied into this is what a race is, this is what it entails, these are the pieces to it. So I was just curious if that walkthrough was going on with many of your newer clients.
Yeah, especially with our first year events. And then also, to your point, it just kind of jogged my memory about something. It's also a really strange industry because of the client piece. Because we own about 25 events, we produce another 25 events, and then we time all the, like 30 or 40. And it's the only industry that I've really been able to put my finger on where it's like your clients' clients are also your clients. Like it's this cascading thing where, I mean, seriously, think about it. I get hired for, say, Bob's race. I come in to time or produce, and the finisher crosses the finish line and high-fives me for putting on his event. That's kind of neat. Like, we're, you know, like, or I guess we also get that complaint, too, if we screwed something up. But yeah, I mean, just like the fact that we're so involved with the clients on all levels, and going back to managing expectations, that managing the athlete expectations is just as important as managing the event owner and or race director's expectations.
Have you ever had to fire a client? If so, why?
Oh, yes. I have. I'm thinking about one specifically. So I was not as good at managing expectations at one point early on, and a gentleman contacted me and said, I produce gymnastics events. I was like, okay, that means very little to me, but he's like, well, I can get 10,000 people at events. I'm like, that sounds awesome. Let's do it. And so I said, what kind of event? So you can see how this didn't start the right way. What kind of event? Oh, I want to put on a mud run. Okay. Right, yep. So, all right, where is it? It's in this place. I know the guy that owns the property, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. So I am hired to time the event. That's it. So the management of expectations. When you put on a road running event, the roads are marked. There are lines. You stay in between them. You turn left onto Maple Drive. Anything off-road, you have to clearly define every aspect of the event. Again, I'm the event timer. So I show up, I put my mats down, I put my finish line up, I get my arch, my clock, my PA. Gentleman doesn't show up. He shows up about an hour beforehand. And so there's an adult race and a kids race. The adult race is maybe like 6 miles, the kids race is a mile at best. And there's this huge slide in the mud. And the adults go off, and then 20 minutes later, the kids go off. Everything started 30 minutes late, which I'm a timer. It drives me nuts. Like, I can deal with like 5 because I only have so many jokes, but like after 5, I start to like my eye twitches. And so we send the kids off. And he leaves to go help manage the course, which I kind of also have a rule that the event owner is not allowed to leave the finish line area. Because if something comes up, there has to be a point of contact with the race ownership. If I'm the race director, I will always be there. If somebody else is the race director, I need that point of contact to be there. He left. Kid started. I don't know how long it takes a kid to run a mile, but after 20 minutes, I hadn't seen one. After 30 minutes, I had not seen one. So then we started getting finishers from the 6 mile. We were in a field. It was kind of like the opposite of a supernova, I guess, because they were coming from all directions instead of going from all directions. So we had finishers quite literally from every single direction. Once we started getting the adult finishers, the kids started to trickle in about 45 minutes later. And as it turns out, he didn't look at blazes on the course and put up the same color blazes as the surveying tape that was out. And so the kids ended up on the adult course 20 minutes after the adults started, so there are also no volunteers to turn them back. So we had, it was not a big event, thank God. But yeah, we had 35 or 40 kids lost in the woods that came back, honestly, I'd covered in mud and bleeding. And I was getting threats from parents, and it's the only time I've gotten on the mic and thrown somebody under the bus. Because they were blaming me, and going back to managing expectations, a lot of these folks put on races one time. This is my life. This is your life. Most of the people in here, it's your life. So if you hire someone and you start getting threats because of that, like that's a threat to your business. That's a threat to your livelihood because somebody else, So long story short, we found them all. It took me 6 months to get paid. It's the only time I've threatened a lawsuit for payment, and so yeah. Sorry, this is really long-winded. I still am a little PO'd. That was like 9 years ago.
we can feel that.
Yeah, remember, like, you can see it out. So, yeah.
It's not a question, but it kind of goes on exactly what you said on the managing expectations. The biggest thing I hate to hear from a race director is just do it the way we did it last year. So when I hear that phrase, it makes me cringe.
Right.
And then that's when there's a phone call of, no, we're going to go exactly through what we're doing, even if everybody was there last year. We're going to double check everything.
Yeah, and we even have, for our timers, we have small books. Now, once you get to a certain point, you don't need it anymore, but like for the first couple years, we basically like step 1, connect to the internet. Step 2, turn on the GPS. It's ridiculous. But that way, if I get a phone call, because most of the time we have multiple computers set up if I'm at an event and I've got TeamViewer managing the other just in case. But I can say, did you do step 14? And I'll look at it and see if they checked it. I had check boxes beside it so that I didn't have to, going through those lists, once you get to a certain size, it's the only way that you can continue to scale. You can't just cross your fingers and hope that things are going to go well. I guess you can, but good luck.
How often or what percentage of your events do you also kind of oversee on-site registration and the packet pickup and the management of the data, so data integrity is not an issue?
So we manage almost all the data because of trust. So we also really don't take paper registrations at all anymore. And on the RunSignUp side, like the check-in app, we do not use the sign-up app. We leave online registration on until, for most events, 5 minutes before the event starts. And we just tell people, go on your smartphone. We do have kiosks if they need to use them, but online registration is available. Part of that is because we do a lot of USA Triathlon events, and so we need to be able to sync with the API. And so we need for them to be able to log in and do all that because I don't like holding USA Triathlon waivers. But in terms of packet pickup, the whole empowerment side is most of our events are just now switching to the check-in app. So we're going in and either myself or a staff member will stay with packet pickup, usually for a couple hours, to make sure there's a very clear understanding of how this is supposed to go. Are you guys good? All right, we're good. All right, high five, and we roll out with, phone in hand in case we need to come back, answer questions, what have you. But in most situations, we actually empower the volunteers to run packet pickup because things have become so streamlined. And it's RunSignUp's fault, that I now have time to go do other things other than sit at a packet pickup table. And we don't have runners anymore. We don't have bringing paper registration forms. We don't have, we still have misspellings, but it's because somebody's got a lazy finger. The male-female box has to be checked. We just have, the data integrity has actually gone up significantly because we've gone directly into the streamlined process of utilizing online registration with the sign-in or the check-in app.